Hi again from Central Virginia. I'm going to show you something that's really special. Blackberry lilies. It's been a while since I've done a video for about my wild yard. My yard's still pretty wild. We're mowing now, but there's still some wild things here, and here's one. This is what I call my back porch garden, and this is a garden that I created in the site of where there was a humongous maple tree that shaded this whole space. Here's what I want to show you. You see those glorious orange flowers? Those are blackberry lilies, and they are super special. First of all, the blooms are just stunning. They're small. Here's my finger, about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches across, and they're many on a cluster. The plant grows, and these blooms are about 4 to 4.5 feet tall, so they're big, and they are just stunning, I think. So why are they called blackberry lilies? Well, it's about this seed pod right here. And later in the summer, this will break open. And the seeds inside are in a cluster that looks very, very much like a blackberry. And that's why they're called blackberry lilies. I did not plant this patch of blackberry lilies. In fact, even when the big tree was here, it wasn't this large. This has really happened in the last 2 summers. But there were a few that were growing at the base of the old tree. So what's going on and how come they're so prolific? These blackberry lilies grow everywhere, and I don't have to do a thing. It's amazing. Here's an example. These are by the old smokehouse, and you can see that my shadow is shadowing it. These flowers, like sunflowers, track with the sun during the day. I'll show you another patch that is just establishing itself in the last 2 years. See how they're just growing everywhere, literally. About 2 years ago, I noticed a couple of little plants just kind of tucked back where those are in the back. And they grew, they sprouted their seeds, and now look, this is covering. I couldn't try to plant a successful patch of flowers this big. And the foliage stays pretty and green and spiky like this all until the fall. So it's really nice to have here. It kind of fills in this space. Blackberry lilies originated in China, and they were brought to the British colonial colonies in the 1750s, 1760s, 1770s, as the trade between China and Britain and her colonies were starting. And of course, that was also a time when naturalists were going kind of gaga and collecting specimens from all over the world, and it was a good time for botanists. So these plants came from China. And I'll tell you a little bit of a story about how they came to be here, but I need to go and sit down in the shade to do that. It's quite a warm day, even though it is going on 5 o'clock in the afternoon. We have a visitor visiting our family from China, and when she saw the lilies yesterday, she said, "Oh, I know those." So that was confirmational in terms of what we know about those lilies. This is the house that I currently live in. This is the house I grew up in. I just want you to take a little note about the back part and the front part and notice the difference in the architecture, particularly the roof lines. So much better in the shade sitting down. All right, so this house, although I grew up here, this house and this property came into my family when my great-grandmother purchased it in the 1890s. I think I've mentioned that in some of my Wild Yard series before. This house there has been a farm on this site, and the original part of this house, the back part with the sloping roof, was here from about, we know, from 1742. So that's the date of this particular tract of land. The front part of the house, the tall part, has only been here since about 1830. Interesting. How did it get here? Well, it was taken down piece by piece and moved from a mountain that's about a mile away. We can walk moved from up on top of that mountain to this site. How do we know that? Well, it wasn't in my family then. We know that because of tax records and deeds. And the house changed hands in 1830. It was a result of a gambling debt on a horse race. That's plausible because here in this area there was a racetrack and a racetrack farm just nearby up until about the time of the Civil War. So that's very plausible. We do know that this house was taken down, every piece was numbered, and it was brought to and relocated on this site attached to the old house here. So that is an interesting thing in and of itself. Do we know it's true? Yes, we do know it's true, based on records. And we also know because when my parents came to take possession, take custody of this house, they were having work done and they actually saw numbers written on the pieces, the backside of the siding and beams. Pretty astonishing. But what about those lilies? Okay, so up on the mountain, there was a site that my mother always said was the original site of the house, but we didn't know that for sure. There were some foundation things around there and evidence of outbuildings. So several years back, we had a local professor who is an expert in colonial domestic architecture. She came out and she was scoping around the place. And she said, yes, this is definitely the site that this house was on. What was her first clue? Blackberry lilies were growing wild there. They weren't growing wild anywhere else, but they were growing wild there. And that indicated that that was indeed the site of an old farmstead, and, you know, tobacco farm like everything else around here was back then. So, or mixed use, really. So that is of note. And so my brother-in-law, who loves plants, dug some up and brought some back here and planted them in the shade of the maple tree. And the ones here just took off like they'd always been here, kind of right by the right in the shadow of the same house that their ancestors had been growing under. So that's how we know. What about the proliferation? Why do they grow everywhere in my yard? The answer is birds. Remember those seeds? The birds absolutely love those seeds, and they deposit them everywhere around the property. And I could not be happier because I don't have to I'm not a flower grower by nature. I grow a lot of flowers in my garden, but it's like instant free landscaping. Thanks, birds, of something that's kind of rare and unusual. So that is the story of the blackberry lilies in my wild yard. Thanks for watching today. I'm a historian by profession. History is my thing, so I always have to give a little history lesson with everything, much to my family's chagrin, really. Any rate, thanks for watching. Happy gardening. Bye.